Nothing ventured, nothing gained. Please welcome Sarah Cowie.
Have you ever done something really difficult? Something that pushed you, something that challenged you completely out of your comfort zone? And afterwards, you realised that it's the hardest things that are often the most worthwhile. I was caused to think about this last week, and I began thinking about times in my own life, things that I've done that have pushed me out of my comfort zone, and I realised that often these experiences come from the most unexpected places. For me, this was perhaps best learned from a job I had as a student. For a year and a half, I worked in a dementia care home. It was singularly the most challenging and worthwhile job that I've ever had. It pushed me to extremes, to go from, yes, I can do this, to feelings of sadness and resignation and apathy. There are three things that I learnt during the time in the care home that stick out in my mind above all of the others. And that's that hard work comes in many different shapes and sizes. It's that there is nothing more interesting than hearing another person's life story, and that there are few things more worthwhile in life than caring for someone in their most worthwhile state. There's nothing easy about care work, and I have a huge amount of respect for the millions of people all over the world who do it every day, whether paid or unpaid, who give their lives in the service of others. My time in the care home felt like walking into a whole other world. In my first week, I felt like I'd been plunged head first into the deep end with no life belt in sight, just struggling to keep afloat. We had to work shifts to ensure a continuity of care, meaning often my work would finish around 10 o'clock at night and I'd be back in at 6:30 the next morning. It was tiring and physically demanding. My duties ranged from helping people to go to the bathroom, to helping them wash and dress, to helping them eat and leading activities and fun times with them as well. It was very difficult to see a great many of the residents get worse over time. They all had dementia. I'll never forget the day that I saw Margaret, a relatively new person in the home, sat in the hallway. Margaret was just watching home life go on around her. I went over to see how she was. "How are you doing, Margaret? How are you finding things?" She sighed deeply and said, "Is that going to be me? Am I going to end up that way?" To witness such a thing is completely heartbreaking. During term time, I worked one shift a week, and I'd go in and not know who may have passed away while I was gone. We also had to learn how to deal with the often demanding effects of aggressive people who can get often confused and perhaps knew how to use a Zimmer frame as a weapon against you, or someone who would eat and then 10 minutes later would completely forget and come up and shout in your face, "Where's my food? I want my food. Why haven't I eaten?" Hard work came in many different shapes and sizes. There were 40 residents in the home, and they all had varying degrees of dementia, some only in the early stages where they would exhibit just a little bit of forgetfulness now and again. Others who would repeat the same stories over and over again, and others still who'd forgotten how to speak altogether. Yet, despite this, these are some of the best characters that I have ever met. Some of you may have been touched by dementia in your own lives. You know it can be a horrible disease, yet you can still get some amazing characters despite that. I want to tell you about two people in particular. The first is Helen. Helen was 93, a little old lady with a Zimmer frame and a hunched back. She had so much life in her. I loved to spend time in her company. Helen had lived in Edinburgh all her life, and until they passed away, she lived with her parents. She was engaged once, but unfortunately her fiancé died in the war, and she was just never interested in anyone else. Helen had one of the most pragmatic outlooks on life than anyone I'd ever met. She'd say, "Life is what it is, and you make the most of it." My all-time favourite memory of Helen was the day that there were two African members of staff at the back of her chair having a conversation. I went over and said, "How are you doing, Helen? How are you today?" And she went, "I'm just listening to what life's like at the other side of the world." Another is Mary. Despite living in the home for a number of years, Mary always thought that she was just there for a visit and regularly repacked her suitcase. "Oh, what a lovely place, I will come here again," she'd say, suitcase in hand. Fascinatingly, Mary had worked and cracked codes during the war and loved to tell of her experiences. She bounded around the home, talking to other residents, playing Scrabble, reading the newspaper. She was kind and intelligent and never tired of her company. There are so many skills that I learnt during my time there. Learning how to deal with all these characters was certainly one of them. But I think that perhaps the most important skill of all was learning how to care for others in such a vulnerable state. Learning how to help someone to dress, to wash themselves, to put makeup on, to take pride in their appearance once again when they're not able to do it for themselves. To help someone eat when they can't feed themselves anymore. Care work is about caring for someone in such a vulnerable state that it's highly important that their dignity is maintained. I learned how to give palliative care to someone who's dying, to make a dying person comfortable, to moisten their lips with water, to be still, and quiet, and gentle in the last moments of someone's life. But does a worthwhile occupation have to mean a deathly serious or macabre one? No, I don't think so at all. My time in the home was some of the most fun that I've ever had in a job. We laughed a lot, we sang, we had fun, but it was intensely challenging. I do believe that we get the most from life when we really push ourselves into things that are totally new and out of our comfort zone and feel incredibly uncomfortable at first. For me, working with people is perhaps one of the most challenging and uncomfortable of all. There isn't a desk to hide behind. Like in my job at the moment, you're there, you're complicit. Every action counts, there's no hiding. But how utterly exciting. I want to leave you with this thought today and see where it perhaps might lead you in the coming week. The most difficult things in life are the hardest to attain, but they are also the most wonderful.